Let's move on to the last part of today's lesson. It's all about transition words and phrases. The objective for this part of the lesson says students will be able to choose the correct transition word or phrase to use in a sentence. What do you already know about transition words and phrases? How would you define them? Think about what it means to transition from one thing to another. Think about what's the difference between just a word and a phrase. Have you ever baked cookies or a cake before? When you start reading the directions for the recipe, does it ever say last, add the sugar, next, crack the eggs, first, pour the flour? That sounds a little odd, doesn't it? It's clear that these directions are not correct. But how could we fix the directions so that they are in the correct order? Before we did any fixing, the directions said, last, add the sugar, next, crack the eggs, first, pour the flour. And we know that doesn't sound quite right. But if you change around a couple of those transition words, then the instructions make a lot more sense. If you flip-flop first and last, your directions will then say, first add the sugar, next crack the eggs, last pour the flour. Just flipping the words first and last made the directions sound a lot more realistic. Using the correct transition words makes a big difference. Transition words are the words that signal the order of events. There are many different transition words you can use to let your audience know the events in your writing. We often use the words first, next, then, and last. We often also use first, second, third, and finally. Sometimes we even use first of all, afterwards, soon after that, and later. There are many different options to show the transition from one thought to the next. Here are some examples. The ones we use the most in fourth grade are often in this time and sequence category. But in the next little example, you're going to see some transition words that come from the cause and effect category, the addition category, and the contrast category. These are different types of transition words that you will use depending on what type of a transition you are making. In the next example, you are going to see examples that sound like this. Maybe you'll see otherwise, in addition to, or consequently. Here is a piece of text from a previous Evaluate test. Let's read this paragraph and choose the two underlined transition words and phrases that are correct. So you'll notice there are five that are underlined that are either transition words or transition phrases. And of those, only two are correct. Let's read it and find out which ones are correct. From the time I was really little, I have loved to perform. Otherwise, at the age of 3, I had the whole princess losing her glass slipper act down to an art. Additionally, I always made my mom and my sister play the roles of evil stepmom and stepsister. Now, at the age of 10, I am taking my love of performing to the next level. As a consequence, I will audition for my first community theater play. For example, while I am a bit nervous about the audition, the main emotion I am feeling is excitement. Finally, I am living my dream. I want you to pause your video now, And on your piece of paper, I would like you to write down the two pieces of underlined words or phrases that are correct. They sound the best. So pause your video now, write down which ones are correct, then turn it back on to check your work when you're ready. After rereading the passage and writing down the correct transition words or phrases, you should have said the word additionally is used correctly. Then at the end, finally is used correctly. All of the other transition words or phrases are used incorrectly. They just don't sound quite right. So, how do you feel about this part of our lesson? Are you able to choose the correct transition word or phrase to use in a sentence? Well, I'm going to give you a few practice slides or questions to work on that now. You're going to have 7 sentences to read that are missing either a transition word or phrase, and you will need to pick the one that best completes the sentence. You'll need to pick the one that sounds the best.